Hello, everybody.
Utah, give me two.
The Palazzo Podcast, 2 L's, 2 Z's. We are live here on YouTube and Twitch and all the other places we send out our stream to, destination-wise, for the Prospects Power Hour. Of course, Robbie, baseball, and Big Gentle Ben are here, but we got a special guest today. This is a unique show for us, and my first time getting to chat with one of Baseball America's finest. He's a writer. He knows a thing or two about scouting, amateur scouting, international signees, minor leagues. He can do it all. He knows a lot about MLB draft stuff as well. There's nothing that Ben Badler cannot provide. Let's give it up. Ben Badler from Baseball America. Thanks for joining us, Ben. Welcome to the show live from Wayne Manor.
I love the intro, man. I'm fired up. Thanks for having me on, guys.
This is Ben made it happen. So shout out to the two Bens. I don't think I've ever done a show with two Bens, Ben. Have we? Is this our first secondary Ben? Or are you the secondary Ben and he's the primary Ben?
There you go. There's a good question.
You've got the Mike and Mike thing going on. So now
Yeah,
it's the
there we
Ben.
go.
So there we go.
Yeah, we already done that. Yeah, that was not a good show. We don't like to be associated with that. We try to avoid that show. But we're here live, so if you got questions, the chat's open. So take advantage of the live chat while we're here, and we'll try to answer your questions as best we can. Ben is a reasonable human being, from what I can tell, and I think he'll be happy to answer your questions today. Ben, if somebody's never heard of you, if they're just tuning into the show and they're like, who are you? What's going on? How would you describe what you do for a living?
Yeah, I started at Baseball America in 2007. So that's like 16, 17 years now coming up on covering prospects, which is kind of cool to say out loud, kind of scary to think how old I'm getting now. But yeah, covering, like you said, covering minor league prospects, covering the draft, covering the high school underclass prospects, international prospects, pretty much like you said, a little bit of everything, or everything prospects related for us.
Yeah, Ben Chase. I'm going to call you Benjamin, and Ben will be Ben. Benjamin, when's the first time you met Ben, Benjamin?
Well, I guess I've been following Ben's work for a long time. I guess my curiosity for Ben would just be to what initially sparked the interest in international prospects. Was it just an assignment through BA, or was it something you truly were really interested in?
Yeah, when I started at BA, was doing whatever they told me to do or whatever needed to be done, a little bit of everything. But the international side, started doing that in 2008 because I looked around and I was like, we cover the draft like complete lunatics here at Baseball America. It's an absurd amount of depth and detail down to all the late round picks and everything. But why doesn't anybody else do the same thing for international signings, right? Like there's so many international prospects throughout our handbook, obviously in the big leagues as well. It just seems like it's becoming a bigger part of the game, but like, how does the signing process even work for players in the Dominican Republic and Venezuela? At that time we would have players sign and might like occasionally preview a couple players before, at that time the signing date was July 2nd, but a lot of it was, we just heard maybe shortly after, maybe months after the fact that, this guy signed for $1 million or 1.6 million. Jesus Montero, who's that? Like, let's call around and find out. But nobody at that time was really covering international signings and previewing them in a big way, the way we were doing in the draft. So just started making a lot of calls down to, international scouting directors, international scouts, people all across Latin America to try to get more information on these players before they signed. It's not the same as the draft. Obviously, there's a lot more games and detailed information on, especially the college players here in the States. It's a different world covering Latin American prospects, but it's just kind of grown over the years. Every year we do it, it gets a little bit bigger. We had 100 prospects previewed for January 15th this year, so it's kind of wild to look back at kind of what the process was like back in 2008, both for what we do at BA and just how the players themselves were scouted at that time to the way it works right now.
So do you really just contact people down there on like cold calling, or did people give you leads on who to contact?
At that time,
across various countries.
Yeah, I'd have some contacts with some people, and then as you cover more and more of it, and look, like obviously working at Baseball America is a big name to have behind you. So when I'm calling somebody, oh, I'm from Baseball America, yeah, like they know who Baseball America is. Some people, a lot of people would get back to me, and we're happy to chat. And just as it's grown more and more now, it's a lot easier to contact pretty much anybody I need to, and traveling down there too is super helpful too. Being able to go down to the Dominican Republic pretty regularly throughout the year, over the years, being able to see players and just make a lot more contacts that way has been super helpful too.
Wow, Robbie Baseball, you are a very big time Dynasty player. You might be one of the most hardcore Dynasty players I know, and that's saying something because I know some Dynasty hardcores. Would you like to ask Ben a question here? Get this thing rolling. Anybody else wants to ask a question? Jump in the live chat here, and we'll do the same for you.
Yeah, of course. So I've got several, but in addition, I am. Yeah, exactly. I'm just going to rhyme them all off. Good luck. In addition to hockey and lacrosse, we play baseball here in the Great White North. I am in Canada, from Canada. Do you ever find, or have you ever found yourself in Canada scouting? Have you ever looked into U Sport, which is the university level here in Canada, and know of any pro players that have been produced here in Canada? I know lots of guys leave in high school. There's lots of the tournament teams that go down to wherever East Coast side of the States, and they play tournaments every other week. I don't know if you've ever ran across any of them. I'm just curious off the top, your exposure to any of us lovely Canucks.
I was in Canada. They had, oh man, what was the name of the tournament?
Like at Skydome or Rogers Center, whatever?
No, it was out in like Ajax, I think.
Okay.
Some tournament where Cuba was, like the Cuban national team was there.
Okay.
I remember there was some like pretty rowdy games out there. That was a lot of fun to watch, and be able to see those guys. I went to go see the Cuban team in particular because at that time, a lot of the best players had already left at that point, but it was becoming a big deal to still see the Cuban national team at that point, just in case, you never know who's going to leave and who might become available to sign. I think Adolis Garcia was on that team at the time, if I remember right. But yeah, I mean, obviously Canada falls under the draft umbrella. I haven't covered them specifically, but, do definitely see Canadian players. I mean, there's one for this upcoming draft, Brendan Lawson, who I've seen. I'm a big fan of his. If you're looking for somebody in this upcoming draft, left-handed hitting shortstop, see if he stays at shortstop or not. But I think he's a pretty advanced left-handed hitter, big power. So yeah, like you said, and a lot of the Canadian players now, it's tough. And I mean, it's a good thing for them, but in the spring, if you're like a scout based in Canada, a lot of the top players in Canada are going down to, some of these different academy programs in, Virginia, Florida, wherever. So a lot of these guys are going down there, which, again, like if you're an area scout in Canada, kind of stinks for you, but like it's good for the players to be able to get seen a lot more, and they'll go on, I think the junior or the national team will bring a team down to the Dominican Republic they'll play games against the academies, like the team academies down there for them to get seen against good professional competition too. So there's a lot of different opportunities that the players have that typically involves them going outside Canada to just get some more exposure and get seen against really good competition too.
Yeah, I've lost a very good goaltender who decided he wanted to try to be a pitcher. So he went with the tournament team in Stratford, Ontario, and then every other week they were gone somewhere to the States. And then they had Americans on their team who I guess was like a pay-to-play type team. So the Americans were free. The Canadians were kind of paying the way to have those American players. So when they were at tournaments, it was more competitive or whatever. I don't know the exact scenarios of it, but that was a very common thing. I don't know if it's still going on. That was 6-7 years ago. So.
Wow, Canada, what a fun place to be. We're live here with Ben Badler. My wife's Canadian, by the way, so obviously I love Canada to a certain extent. Follow Ben on Twitter at Ben Badler. It's very simple, Ben Badler. We got a question in the live chat I'd love to get answered here, Ben, if you could take a shot at it. This is from Joe Lowry. Shout out to Joe, who's one of our... Joe's the man. Joe knows prospects quite well himself, but he wants to know when and how has the Cuba international signings process changed? It used to be like a secret agent thing, and now I'm seeing Cubans as part of the regular signing period. What do you make of that, Ben?
Yeah, so I think I'm trying to like think of the time. There was a time period where, like you remember Yoenis Cespedes came out
Yeah.
and Jose
And they gotta wait.
Abreu. Yeah, and these guys signed major league contracts at the time. And then there was this like these guys had success, players in Cuba, and agents realized, oh, like these guys should get paid a lot of money. And then there was this huge number of Cuban players who left of all different ages, right? Like some of these guys were in their late 20s, some of these guys were still teenagers, early 20s, all across the board. Some of them had good numbers in Cuba, but weren't really good, like didn't really have a future in professional baseball, but it just, drained Cuba of all of its top talent. So now, like since a lot of those players have already left, like the guys who could come over now and immediately step into a major league roster, maybe even go to like AA, AAA, the upper levels of the minors. Now, a lot of the players who are leaving are the players who are, players who are on their 15U national team or 18U national, even really younger than 18, like the 15U, even like the, players who are leaving Cuba now at 13, 14 years old to go to, a country like the Dominican Republic and sign as a international free agent there. So you have Cuban players now who are more the traditional age of the, the 16, 17-year-old kids that we see signing out of the Dominican Republic and Venezuela primarily. So you're seeing players definitely leave at a younger age. The tough part for, I think, the Cuban players now is that, we see this with them. They'll, you can't, the international signing process works in the sense that teams will agree to sign a player well before they're actually eligible to sign on January 15th. Right. So, right, like the guys who signed this year, January 15th, a lot of them have had deals in place to sign for a year, 2 years, 3 years in some cases. With a Cuban player, you can't agree to sign a player who's like still in Cuba, right? Like you don't know if they're actually going to leave Cuba to try to sign with the team. So those guys, because of the speed of the market, end up kind of getting disadvantaged where these teams will commit so much money of their bonus pool for a given class where the player might be eligible to sign, but then this player comes out and like there's not enough money for teams to pay that player what he's looking for and what a team is even willing to pay the player. So the player ends up having to wait an extra year. So we'll see that where the Cuban players might be eligible to sign, say January 15th this year, but some of them will wait until January 15th the following year when the new bonus pools kick in and there's just more money available that teams have to be able to spend on the player.
Ben, are you saying money still influences all this?
Yeah, I think money is important to this. Yeah. I think that's fair to say.
We're live here with Ben Badler. Make sure you follow him on Twitter, Ben Badler. Benjamin Chase, you and I, you wrote some notes down. We were talking about some of the changes in the scouting process. Could you dive into that, Benjamin, and serve it up to Ben?
I was to say, it along with Cubans being more prominent in J15, I've noticed, like someone like Jun-Suk Shim with the Pirates last year, a little more. With the J15, you're seeing more Asian players that are being involved in that system than I guess I was ever really used to back in, in the early 2010s, trying to pay attention to like what the Braves were signing when I was doing writing for Braves sites. That you didn't see Asian prospects coming in that group, and then I guess I'm just kind of curious if, like, your scouting window in general, if maybe some of that is allowed by the shift to January 15th and how much of that, the scouting window on a player has changed with that move from July to January.
Yeah, I think it depends on the team, the player, like everybody who grows up in the Dominican Republic or Venezuela, like they have obviously winter ball, but they don't have any aspirations of like there's no league for them to play in full time at home the way there is for players in, Korea, right? Like a lot of them will just stay in Korea and play in the KBO and make good money there and stay at home. But some of them do have aspirations to sign right out of high school with a major league club. So you do see some of those players. It's still a pretty small number of players, though, we're signing each year out of Korea, Taiwan. It's like probably, I think, in the single digits still. So you do have the, outlier players like that. And it's, I think, just the way the speed of the market works now, where the teams are committing so much of their bonus pool money at such an early point in the process to players for, whether it was July 2nd or now January 15th. They do that for the players in Latin America, but for players in Taiwan, Korea, those players are generally waiting until they're graduating high school just to sign. So they're also at a disadvantage in that sense, where, okay, by the time they're ready or willing to agree to sign with a club, a lot of that bonus pool money that teams have has already been accounted for and spent elsewhere. So it's I think it's disadvantageous for them to be in that position, unfortunately.
So the other, I guess, for me, what do you think, Ben, as far as the process now that it's January rather than July? Is that something you like? And I guess the folks I talk to like the change, just because having it in July with where draft is, and you've got, there was a whole lot of other things going on in the middle of the summer, like right there. And now this is kind of the focus you can have in the off season right there for those types of folks, I guess. So the team folks that I guess I've talked to like it, but I guess I'm just curious what your feedback has been in your own personal view.
Yeah, as far as giving it its own spotlight, I think certainly having it on January 15th is more of an advantage than having it be on July 2nd, where it's, like you said, there's major league games going on that day. The draft is going on. Minor league games are going on. It's, it's 2 days right before a big 4th of July holiday here in the States too. It kind of gets lost a little bit more in the shuffle there, whereas January 15th, unless it collides with like salary arbitration day on Twitter, the most exciting day on Twitter, of course. There's nothing else going on in baseball, so it is cool to have all these players get the spotlight on them for one day on the baseball calendar. The downside is, well, there's a couple downsides. One, for the players, because of the way they get taxed on their bonuses, they typically, when it was July 2nd, they would sign a contract for July 2nd. They would get, the contract is technically for the following year, but, they would get paid. So they wouldn't actually play in official games until the following year, but they would get paid before the end of the calendar year. If they're not coming to the States before then, they're not getting, they're not having to pay U.S. income tax. Whereas now, like if you bring a player to the United States, he's going to get taxed on that bonus, which is like, all right, like we have, you sign for $1 million. It's a big chunk of your bonus you're giving to Uncle Sam. And it's not like, oh, you're some, big executive making $1 million a year. This is a one-time thing that you're getting taxed on a pretty high rate. So that's why a big part of the reason why even the most advanced players with, exceptions here and there, are staying in the Dominican Summer League now for their first season instead of coming over to the ACL or the Florida Complex League. And then the other disadvantage too is, you just, when you're signing players July 2nd, okay, now we have them in our system. We have a year basically to go to get them ready to develop them or continue their development before the official games start in the Dominican Summer League. So we have, what at the time was called Tricky League games, which is these unofficial, informal games between teams of players that they just signed for July 2nd. And maybe some guys are bringing in for tryouts to, get these guys playing in games, and just the off-field stuff of learning the routine, how we practice, how we, do things in the weight room, how we just do things day to day at the academy, Dominican Instructional League, all this stuff. And now it's like, all right, now I have to sign them January 15th. So we're missing all that time between July 2nd, January 15th to, kind of jumpstart and expedite the development for these players. So, there's some advantages to having it January 15th, but definitely some trade-offs to moving it back to.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a follow up on that now that you've opened the door here. So they've moved the date back, so now it's a full calendar year. Are there MLB teams you've seen take a player that you've been excited for, only to see the organization make what appears to later on become a developmental error, whether that's they skip them past complex league or they keep them in the DSL an extra year? They end up in A-ball. We've seen Colorado do it with Betancourt this past year, and he struggled mightily. Are there things that you have seen some of the MLB teams do within this change or prior that you think has hurt a player? Or do you think more often than not, they're really trying to do the best for the player at all times, not the organization does this at all times, stay the company line?
As far as promoting a player to a level too quickly, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we do see examples of players who probably are getting pushed too fast, but we also see examples of players who maybe get promoted and struggle, but then respond to that challenge of struggling and adapt to that level of competition and figure it out. I think I kind of tend to think that what level a player is at or is assigned to is not going to make a huge difference ultimately in the long term. I think there can be examples of like, okay, we need this, we need this pitcher to work on a specific pitch. Like we really wanted to work on his changeup, but if he's struggling with his control, he's always getting behind in the count and you're pushing him to a level that's just too far advanced for him. Well, all right, well now the count is consistently, 1-0, 2-0, 2-1. Like he's just not going to have as much opportunity or desire.
He needs a lower level of hitter to get to 0-1, 0-2, right?
Yeah, you don't want a guy to be like too far over his head. So, there's some truth to that, but I think overall, ultimately, like the good ones end up figuring it out.
The good ones figure it out. Robbie, does that work for you? You accept that?
Yeah. I'll take
Okay.
it. I was curious also, Ben, just as a follow-up on that one, if you can speak at all about the transition that sometimes these players go through from when they're signing to when they actually begin with the MLB team. You kind of led with the transition from June, July into January. But like when the team decides to move them stateside, do you have any insight on when that is kind of discussed? Like, would that be something within signing where they say it's 2024 now, we're going to bring you over next year? Or, I mean, you kind of talked about the tax side of it before and it almost being like it is a bad thing when the government's going to take that money from you.
Yeah, I mean, the players and like their agents will say like, no, I want to stay here and keep more of our
right. Part of the deal is he stays, right? Yeah,
absolutely. Like for like the super advanced players, like the Padres it sounds like you're going to bring over DeVry this year, just like they did with Ethan Salas last year. So I'm sure that was discussed before, at least before the official signing happened about the plan. And then, I mean, coming over, and that's one of the biggest jumps too for a player, right? Like I think going from the minor leagues, usually from AAA to the big leagues is a big one. Going from the complex league to a full season league, from the jump to high A to AA can be a big one. But I mean, a huge one obviously is going from the Dominican Summer League to your first time in the States. Right. Obviously the competition is better, but you're getting used to everything in a foreign country where maybe you speak some of the language, maybe not. I mean, I think teams are doing a better job now, and there's just more technology, more tools that are, at everybody's disposal. Everybody has a translator in their computer in their pocket right now, which was not something people had 10 years ago coming over. So it is there's an easier things have become easier for players coming over now than it was a decade ago, but it's still a big adjustment. And again, these kids are like 18 years old, away from home and away from away from that living in an academy, the team academy environment for the first time. So I mean, think about just the first time, if you went to college, like I don't know, like my first semester of my freshman year was not my most shining moments. My first time away from home there. So a lot of these kids, go through another learning curve too. And I didn't even have to leave my state to do it. So these guys are a different country.
So is this fair then? Because Ted brought this up. He says, why aren't they teaching these kids English? But if you are saying they've got a translator in their pocket, they really don't need that. Do you think it's unfair? Because he's saying, couldn't they hire one English teacher? And I'm saying, first off, you don't have to adhere to the English language to come to this country. It never has been a prereq for anybody who comes here. But do you think that's a disadvantage in any way when it comes to maybe the future of their careers? They go into their mid-20s, late 20s, they become someone special. And not everybody's going to become someone special either. So I'm just curious how you come around on all that.
Well, I mean, the teams all do have English language programs, and some of them have more.
There you go, Uncle Ted.
High school programs at their Dominican academies and others. Some of it's just up to the player too, how much he wants to put into it. But also, it's like, it's not easy to learn a second language. Like I speak some Spanish. Like if depending who it is, I can understand them better than others. But it's not easy. I mean, it's like Julio Rodriguez, is incredibly bright and smart and like picked up the language super quickly within like a couple of years. But I don't know, it's not easy if you're signing out of Dominican Republic at 16 years old, 17 years old to suddenly become fluent in English by the time you're coming over to the States at 18, 19 years old, just a couple of years later either.
That's fair.
And I know, like Ronald Acuna Jr. was interviewed by Atlanta Journal-Constitution here either last year or the year before, and he made the comment that he uses a translator not because he can't speak English, because he can, and he did that whole interview with the reporter in English, but because when they ask him a question post-game, they want an immediate reaction. They want an immediate response. And for him, speaking in his natural language is easier to do a quick thought, quick words, and make sure you're saying the right words that you want to say, because otherwise you say the wrong word and it turns into a freaking sound clip that everyone plays for 3 weeks because you mistranslated something from Spanish to English and said just the wrong word. And that's what they're trying to avoid in many cases.
Yeah, you just, you want to speak with precision and make sure that what you want communicated gets communicated correctly, especially if you're, Ronald Acuna Jr. and everybody is going to be hanging on what you're saying.
Absolutely fair. Oh, I hope that helps you, Uncle Ted. Yes, there's more than you know or what we know goes on behind the scenes and what goes on down there and in many of the different countries. But I wanted to ask real quickly if you could shed any light or what your comments are related to the recent athletic story about the Dominican Republic and it was a pretty in-depth article. Did you think it was a fair article? Did it awaken any realities that we didn't know, or is this old news?
I think age falsification is definitely something that's been going on. It's not like a secret. It's been going on for a long time. So I think it does seem like there are some more prominent players who have been caught up in it. Probably will take a little bit more time for all the details of what exactly is happening right now to come out, but we'll see if it ends up. We'll see what ends up coming from it. But I think age falsification is something that's definitely not anything new to the Dominican Republic, unfortunately.
Or just amateur sports, right? Amateur sports with money on the line. Like you always have parents who are thinking, well, if they're back a year, right? Like they're born in December. So if we could, or January, if we could get them back that year, they've got a whole other year to develop and all that crap too. So,
I mean, are we really going to be surprised when the report comes out and says Bartolo Colon is actually about 65 right now? I mean, he aged to be a mid-30s year old when he was, supposed to be 25. So it makes sense. But no, I mean, if you go back and look, we've been doing this for the entire length of baseball. I mean, how old was Satchel Paige really? Does anyone truly know? And I mean, we have, when you don't have excellent documentation in hand, which in lots of countries in the world we still don't, sometimes there is that loophole you can make. And that's unfortunately what we end up running into on a worldwide basis. For me, I guess, Ben, one question I'd have coming off of that a little bit, kind of hitting a political end of things. I noticed it was 2-3 years ago, you guys you didn't include for a long while the Venezuelan signing bonuses with players, and just kind of curious to have you talk a little bit to some of that with the money being mentioned and things like that with these young players.
Yeah, I mean, Venezuela has been, just an unfortunate situation in recent years. Teams have basically pulled entirely out of their academies. Like there used to be a Venezuelan summer league. I think it eventually got down to I think it was 4 teams at one point, and then I forget who the last one that pulled out was, and it was like, all right, well, we can't just have a 3-team league. So the teams all, they all still have scouts on the ground in Venezuela, but at a certain point, and it still is true now, a lot of the big showcases for Venezuelan players moved to Colombia, to places. I would go to Cartagena. There are showcases in Medellin, Bogota, all these different places in Colombia where the Venezuelan agents would bring their players to Colombia because the American scouts just didn't feel safe or comfortable going around, going into Venezuela. You need a visa to go into, all these complications going in there.
This is from the government, the local Venezuelan government. For those that don't know, I'm just curious. There was
what do you mean?
Like they were making things harder on everybody from the Venezuelan side, from the government side. I don't know the politics of it. So,
well, yeah, I mean, just the situation in Venezuela just became worse as a country. People felt less safe there, and it just so if you don't have scouts coming in from the states, like the international directors, the guys who are ultimately making decisions on these players. They wanted to get these players, the agents still want to sign players. The players still trying to get signed. You still have scouts on the ground in Venezuela, but a lot of the showcases were then organized by the players' agents. Let's say, all right, well, let's go next door, bring the players from Venezuela to Colombia. Scouts are more willing to go to Colombia and see these players. So I do think the situation has gotten better in recent years. There's definitely no more American scouts or just scouts in general from outside of Venezuela now who are going into Venezuela. So it seems like they're getting more comfortable with that, but it's not the same. It's not the same ease of just flying down to the DR, go in. I mean, that country, it's just different situations. So the good thing is it does seem, again, anecdotally at least, and just from talking to people in Venezuela, people who are more regularly traveling into Venezuela, that it does seem like things are starting to get better, but we'll see.
Oh, wow. See, I'm learning so much here with Ben Badler. He's a wealth of knowledge and information here. If you got a question, you can throw it in the live chat while we're still here for about another 20 minutes. Uncle Ted wanted to follow up on what he was talking about with the English. He says, no, but it's better for the sport to have stars that can communicate with the dang audiences. Well, Ted, that's your opinion, but we still have other ways to make that happen. It's not like these players haven't flourished. There's a lot of players with English as a second language that have flourished in this game. We got a lot of examples of that. He said it's not easy to teach a 20-year if they're signing these kids at 16. Well, and he says finally that podcasting in baseball is the future. You better learn.
Podcasting, huh?
Do you think a podcast is on these players' minds, Ted? Come on, get out of here. Also, Robbie, why does Rob have a coffee cup? Says, I know who that is. That's Ty. What's up, Ty?
I apologize, Ty. It's midday. It's half full of Baileys, but I had to leave work early, so I didn't think it was appropriate to crack all the beers, and save those for tonight.
No judgment. No judgment here, my friend. Also, there's no way Badler has read all those books. That's probably true. And then lastly, where did the big ticket international pitching prospect go?
Well, that's a good question because, if you just look at the top international bonuses each year, I don't even think this year we had a pitcher signed for $1 million. So I think of the top 50 bonuses, maybe one toward the 50-ish range was a pitcher. The Cardinals gave Brunelli Franco from the Dominican Republic $800,000, but teams just don't want to pay a lot of money for 16, 17-year-old pitching. You look in the States this year, I think it was one high school pitcher who got drafted in the first round because I think teams just look at the track record of high school pitchers in the first round of the draft, and it's not great.
It was under 20% that they exceeded rookie limits when I did the dive of 12 years ago. But dated back to 2011 up to 2023, less than 15% of the high school pitchers through 51 innings. That got drafted.
And we're talking about pitchers who are mostly like 18, some 19, some 17, mostly around 18 years old in the States. All right, well, now take a couple years off that where you're trying to make a big bet on a 16-year-old pitcher, and really, again, because these decisions are being made so early in the process, you're probably really looking at a player who's 15, 14. Like, teams are just not willing to bet a whole bundle of money on a 14, 15-year-old pitcher for the most part. They're looking around and saying, hey, like, let's look at this Houston Astros rotations they had in the World Series, where it's like Framber Valdez and Luis Garcia and Christian Javier, all these guys who they're signing for 10 grand, guys are signing at quote unquote older
as well.
Yeah, guys, exactly, guys who are older age pitchers for them. I mean, they're still like 19, 18 years old. It's high school, senior, college, freshman age, but it's older for an international pitcher to be signing. And they're saying, look, we can develop arms from all different price points and ages, whereas the big ticket, the big priced international hitters have a much better track record. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be all sorts of busts when you're signing players at 16 years old, but a lot of the big bonus guy, where it's Vladimir Guerrero Jr., like that year where it was like Eloy Jimenez, Devers, Gleyber Torres.
Yeah, that was a good year. 16, I think.
Yeah, 2013 or like Julio Rodriguez, that 2017 class was really good. So I mean, teams just realizing, it's a lot better value to get to pay up for the bats and then try to find the arms at the lower price points, which kind of sucks if you're a pitcher, obviously, down there.
I had one that we didn't get to earlier in the chat, bringing this back up. Ben, if you could add any light to it, that'd be great. This was about the Angels and a potential lawsuit in regard to broken agreements leading into the signing period. Any update on that and any potential changes because of that?
I have not heard any update on that situation specifically, but I also haven't heard of any, I haven't noticed any changes as far as the way teams operate. Teams are still doing super early agreements with players, and not every case does that agreement end up holding up. Sometimes it's for a legitimate reason. Player fails a physical, fails a drug test. Those are natural reasons to back out of an agreement, or the agreement is really contingent upon the player passing the physical, passing the drug test. So that's normal. But there are still examples of both teams and players backing out of deals. So haven't really noticed any changes as far as the way teams are actually operating that way either.
Yeah, that's going to happen. I'm not surprised to hear that. And Ty's follow-up to what he asked you earlier, it just seems that they aren't making it to the pros at the same rate they did in years prior related to the big-ticket pitchers. Did anything change? I think you just kind of laid it out, right?
Yeah, I don't know, that the hitters are not succeeding as much, or
the pitchers
pitching.
aren't.
Yeah,
since Adrian Morion disappointed everybody, which I think was the Vlad year. I think that was the same year. We see guys, right? Yuri Perez. There's a list of guys that are great now, but like you mentioned, a bunch of them, Ben, they're all with the Astros. Is there a secret sauce, or like you said, is it just waiting? Just don't, spend your money on the bats now, scoop up pitchers later on once they're older.
Yeah, I think it's teams are, seeing the results in the draft where it's just, no matter what resources you want to put toward it, it's just hard to predict with a whole lot of precision the future of high school pitching. It's going to be even more difficult when we're talking about 16-year-old pitchers too, and you chop off a couple of years of age there. So I think they're just saying, why would we make big bets on a pitcher at that age? And especially when the guys who, the pitchers who have gotten a lot of money, there's some success stories, like you back obviously like Francisco Liriano got a lot of money way
Oh,
back.
you're going
in the
so
day,
far
or-
back though.
Yeah, or like
Oh.
like Felix
But-
Hernandez was a great
Yeah.
signing. Julio Urias.
So when I
Um,
did this a couple nights
yeah.
ago, Ben, I went back to 2015, 2016, looking for the guys who had signed for money that are
Mhm.
MLBers, and it was like Yenny or Cano. That was the beginning, middle, and end of the list of guys who had big bonuses as pitchers who are still like MLBers now, and he's a relief pitcher with the Orioles.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he came over out of Cuba, signed a little older age. Kind of
Right.
like that's like the A's signed. Oh man, I'm blanking on his name.
Anoa, Michael Anoa.
Well, yes, they signed
Yeah.
him, but I'm thinking
Oh,
the guy
okay.
that they signed from
Oh,
the last
yeah.
year's class for $3 million, whose name I'm blanking on. off the
I
top
had
of my
I
head.
had a
Vera?
list of names and I didn't want to rhyme them off, and I deleted it.
Yeah,
Is
he's
that
in our
Vera?
top 100.
Like Mero Vero or Vera? Isn't that his
No,
last name?
I'll find it.
Okay.
But they gave him $3 million, but it's like, yeah, he's also, I think he was 18 or 19 years old at the time, right? So it's a little bit of a different bucket with him compared to signing a 16-year-old pitcher out of the DR or from Venezuela.
Yeah. And that's so I guess for me, we come on, we were just bringing up the Angels. The Angels have had their stuff in the international market and not gotten maybe what a lot of teams would hope for. We're actually on this channel going to I'll have a whole podcast on the Orioles later today. That's a situation.
Luis Morales, that's the guy.
There we
Joe.
go.
Morales, that's right.
But
Thank you.
but this is the Orioles were an organization that didn't touch the international market for a long time. And how, I guess, quite frankly, how are teams all accessing the market in the same way now? Or are there certain teams that still, they won't touch a 7-figure bonus, but they'll fill out the amount that they got? I mean, the change in how that money is supposed to be allocated, I've seen has done some of that for teams to where it used to be where, they could trade all that away and it was, and gain more the other way, it doesn't have the same effect as it used to back in the day. But it seems like everyone's at least spending something quality anyway.
Yeah,
in terms of price.
that's one of the big changes from when I started. Is like back at the 2008 through like 2010, you maybe had 10 teams that were really serious competitive players for international signings, and then it came to the point where it was basically everybody except for the Orioles, and then like the Marlins would be like in some years outside, like their previous ownership was not great and didn't give their people in Latin America the most resources to work with. So, but otherwise, yeah,
Bye.
yeah, the Orioles were like the sore outlier by the end of it up until they brought in Mike Elias. But it wasn't like this was like Dan Duquette's idea either, to be like, oh, like there's players in the Dominican. No, like we don't want to sign players from the Dominican.
Where do they
Republic.
keep coming from? These
No,
Blue
it
Jays.
was like it was obviously an ownership call to basically just avoid signing international players for.
They didn't want to set up an academy either, right? Blue Jays are one of the first in the Dominican that did it, and that kind of like paved the way for others, but not everyone did it.
Yeah, every team has an academy down there now. It's some are more bare bones, functional, maybe a little dysfunctional, depending on the older ones. But there's a lot of teams that have pretty new academies down there, so everybody's set up down there. But yeah, the Orioles for a while were just a complete joke there, which and it takes a long time. Like you see what Elias came in and hired Kobe Perez. They started in like 2018 or 19 maybe. But even then, it's like, hey, like, all right, we're good to go. We're going to start spending in Latin America, but everything moves so fast. Like, you can't sign the top players for the next year because they've already committed to other clubs.
They're
so,
spoken to. They're spoken
yeah,
for. Yeah.
So it takes a while. You see throughout their entire, the upper levels of their farm system. I mean, I guess Basayo got to Double-A, Samuel Basayo, by the end of the year, and he's been a phenomenal signing for them. But otherwise, the upper levels of their farm system is completely devoid of any international prospect of any value. So there's definitely guys that have at the lower levels now, but it takes so long for these guys to matriculate upwards through the system when you have so many years of just ignoring such an important part of the developing homegrown players. They're still feeling the effects of it, although I don't think any Orioles fans are crying about the state of the farm system right now.
Oh boy. I'm frozen right now, but you can still hear me, and we're live here. Can we cover one of your questions, Robbie, related to
Absolutely.
what we were talking about? Yeah, go ahead.
This is an intense two-parter for you, Ben. So deep breath. Do you play fantasy baseball at all?
I do not play right now.
Not at the moment. Okay. Yeah. Well, as Govier mentioned, I have an issue with it. I play it all the time. It is what I do. Outside the big bonus outside the big bonus players, who are some guys you're comfortable giving some praise to on the hitting side? Or if there's any players you thought should have got an even bigger bonus that you think, we're missing out on. Typically, just for background, in dynasty leagues, people go, okay, this is the bonus for player A, B, C, D, and E. So that's their value, the end. Where might that be out of whack? I need some names. I've got a draft starting tomorrow morning.
We talked about the bonuses are, we talked about what a player signed for on January 15th. That number might have been agreed to 2 years prior, right? So that might have been his value that was agreed to at that time. And they, the teams do adjust the numbers sometimes up, down, whatever. But yeah, there's definitely players who I can't call them late bloomers, but for a kid who's still 16 or 17 years old, but within the context developed maybe later in the process, where if every team reset their bonus pools now and there was a draft, they'd go pretty high. You're looking for somebody like that. I'd say one of them would be the Yankees signed a shortstop from Dominican Republic, Dexter's Peralta.
Writing 6'2".
Yeah, Dexter's Peralta, shortstop, switch hitter, 6'2", a ton of strength, projection still left in his frame. Moves around with real good body control and ease at shortstop. We'll see which way it ends up going physically, but right now it looks like he has a chance to stay at shortstop, and it's a lot of contact from both sides of the plate. I like the swing, bat speed is definitely there. He already hits the ball hard, and you can see he probably has room to put on another 30, 40 pounds maybe.
Okay. Yep.
So, once that happens, the ball's going to start flying even farther off his bat. So he'd be one guy to watch if you're looking for another shortstop. Out of Venezuela, the Guardians signed Gabriel Rodriguez, not the Gabriel Rodriguez out of Venezuela they signed a few years ago.
The new one?
They definitely have a type Venezuelan shortstop named Gabriel Rodriguez. But their other type is just guys who make a ton of contact. You go see their team every year that they sign, in the Dominican Summer League, and they're typically a lot smaller, very noticeably smaller than everybody else, but a lot of guys who don't swing and miss. It's just a philosophy throughout the organization. He definitely fits that. He was a shortstop on their U15 for Venezuela's U15 World Cup team a couple years ago. Didn't strike out once in the tournament, so definitely a lot of contact. Really high baseball IQ. His dad is a scout for the Brewers. Another guy with really good actions at shortstop. Looks like he has a pretty good chance to stick there. So maybe not the explosiveness or maybe the power upside that Peralta has, but somebody who should make a lot of contact and has a pretty good chance to stay at shortstop too.
Excellent.
Wow. I disappeared, but I love the answer. I got the gist. I was here for the beginning of it. So that is what you get with Ben Badler. Make sure you follow him on Twitter, Ben Badler. Big Jet to Ben, MJ Govier, Robbie Baseball, Palazzo Podcast, 2 L's. 2
Utah. Give me 2.
Final question time. We're about to wrap this thing up here. Ben, you want to get on the record? Benjamin, you want to get the record?
I'm going to actually piggyback a little bit on Joe's question here. You had mentioned in the list that you have on the BA site, you have guys that were trending up. He's curious if there are any that are a big trend down. And I guess for me to add on a little bit to that, yes, we know they're 16, and so therefore truly calling anyone having a quote unquote high floor at that age is almost impossible. But is there anyone who's to you has pretty safe skills in this class?
A safe skills. I think, yeah, I mean, I think to me, the more polished you are as a hitter makes you a safer relatively player. Like, obviously I don't want to choose like DeVries, right? Like kind of a pretty prominent guy, an easy answer. But, you look at some of the more advanced hitters in the class, and, Perdomo, who the Braves signed, obviously would fit into that group too. Adolfo Sanchez, outfielder out of the Dominican Republic, who the Reds signed. Like I expect him to go out and have success right away. I think the Reds have done we've seen that with a lot of their recent international signings. Guys who are pretty polished. Him, guys who just have like good instincts for the game too. Like there's some guys that, teams will pay big bonuses for who are like phenomenal athletes or have huge raw power. But like struggle to take into the game, and sometimes those guys click. But I think those guys are a risky bet, at least if you're going to pay big money for them. Whereas somebody like, like the Royals signed Yandel Ricardo, shortstop out of Cuba, somebody who's I think a pretty polished switch hitter from both sides of the plate. I mean, he's getting so big now that maybe he stays at shortstop, maybe it ends up being second or third base. I think he still has a chance to stay at shortstop, but. I think an advanced player, very instinctive player with a pretty well-rounded skill set. Somebody I think is I'd call him a pretty safe, not just safe, but a good bet to come out right away and see things click for him offensively. Like I'd be surprised if he doesn't like make it to low A or something. Whereas some of the other guys, it's like, yeah, like there's some big tools and upside here, but high upside, high flame out potential as well.
So then, did you have any guys? And I not asking you to crap on anybody or anything, but is there anyone who kind of had a trend down as we got close to signing time this year?
Yeah, it's tough to say about like a 16-year-old kid who just signed and call him like a trend down guy, but I mean, like there's. Definitely guys who I'm curious to see how things shake out when they get to the DSL. And it's tough with these guys too right now because like the players are committing to teams so early on in the process now that, once you commit to sign with a team, like you're not going around and going to tryouts and showcases and all this stuff. So a lot of the teams and their teams are focused now on players who are going to be signing in 25 and 26 and 27. So by the time, like I'll be on the phone talking to international scouts. Oh, what do you think about this guy? And a lot of times it's, here's what I thought of him when the last time I saw him, which was 2 years ago. Or
but then they're off the circuit, right? Because they're technically, they're signed or committed to sign. So they stop.
The player's already committed to sign with another club at that point. So why would he go do showcases and work out for other clubs? Now you might go around and see him at, like an unofficial game that the player's playing in at his academy, or you're just going around to different fields. You might see a guy, just taking some BP or some ground balls, working out at his own program, but it's. Spot looks here, there, very inconsistent. I mean, there's guys who are signing for $1 million, $2 million, $5 million. That's, international directors some of them just never saw those players at all. And it just sounds weird to say because you wouldn't, like in the States, you wouldn't have a scouting director in the draft being like, oh, like, first round pick, Tommy Troy or Matt Shaw, who never saw him. Like that just wouldn't happen.
Yeah, didn't get a look.
I haven't seen him in 2 years. Right? It's just not. Yeah. It's just totally different down there. So it's like, all right, kind of, as much as I love, covering these players, it is definitely. I think it's important just to be honest and transparent that like like the certainty of information. Not only are they younger, obviously, so the projection is further away, but just the certainty of information about these players right now is not to the same level of depth and detail that, maybe even than it used to be when the signing process was slower, but certainly not compared to what we have on players in, minor league prospects or draft prospects here, where, maybe a player committed to Vanderbilt, a high school player committed to Vanderbilt when he was in 8th grade or 9th grade. But it's not like he stops going out and showcasing and working out for all these guys. Everybody still sees him. So it's just different down there.
It's just different. That's so interesting. Thank you, Ben. Ben, you got to get on the record real quick, though. Jackson Holliday, will he be an impact player in 2024 in the major leagues? Just got to get your opinion on it.
Yeah, he's special, man. One of the most polished hitters I've ever seen that age. Great strike zone judgment, great swing, ton of contact. There's power in there. Like he looks like he could be like the same age as his younger brother, Ethan, who's 16 years old, right? Like he hasn't even gotten into his man strength yet. So once that comes, like you're already seeing some power, but I think he has a chance to be a really, really special player.
Woo! Is there one guy who might make an impact this year in the majors that isn't getting as much pub? Like, do you have a guy that you ride for who you expect good things from even in 2024?
So somebody who would make an impact right away.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be an all-star necessarily, but somebody who could be on the roster this year who's not as touted as a guy like Holliday is.
Trying to think.
Just putting you on the spot.
The Brewers have a couple guys who I think are like. I guess they're in our top 100, but maybe not like I'm not like getting inundated with questions about Tyler Black or.
Yes, you said him. I love. That's my guy. I love Tyler Black. I got him on like every dynasty team. Yes.
Yeah, I think
OBP machine.
Yeah, OBP machine. Like, and he's got this like strong, compact frame where you wouldn't think he runs well, but he does run pretty well. He's a good athlete. I don't know exactly where he's going to end up playing defensively, like as athletic as he is. He's definitely more of an offensive minded guy. They're trying to figure out where exactly he's going to play. Like, I think outfield probably maybe suits him best, but just given who the Brewers have in their organization right now, that's probably not going to happen. But yeah, I think he's just a really polished hitter. And then I think Robert Gasser is an interesting guy where a left-handed pitcher who doesn't have like huge velocity, but if you take out some of his early starts in the year where he was really struggling to throw strikes, and I don't know how much of it was the automated strike zone and him just getting accustomed to that or what, but it really got better after those first month or two of the season. And I think the expectation is probably maybe number 4, chance to be number 3 starter, but then like I don't know, we see these lefties who don't have like huge stuff, and the expectation is back end starter for him, and sometimes they just end up exceeding expectations. They end up becoming a number 2 starter, even if they're not out there blowing gas with their fastball, because he does have, it's not wipeout off speed stuff, but it's just pretty good stuff across the board. We saw him throwing more strikes. Like I was surprised he didn't get an opportunity last year. Spent a lot of time in AAA, and I think the Brewers certainly have a need now for help in their rotation. So if you just want to factor in opportunity too, I think he's somebody who's definitely going to get the chance, and the Brewers seem to be able to squeeze the most out of their pitching prospects too, if you're looking for that angle too.
Yeah, squeeze the juice, wheeze the juice. I prefer to squeeze it, not wheeze it, but that's just me. I want to thank Ben for coming on today. This is Ben Badler, Baseball America. He's a wealth of knowledge, a pretty laid back, cool dude from what I could tell, in addition to being very knowledgeable. So Ben, thanks for coming on here. Is there anything you want to promote around Baseball America that's coming up that is worth people being aware of?
No, thanks guys for having me on. Yeah, we have obviously our top 100 and our top 30 prospects for every team in baseball up right now for PA subscribers. So I always appreciate everybody who.
How did 30 become the number, by the way? Did everybody agree, like, we'll just cut it off at 30?
That's a good question. We started the handbook in 2001, predates my time there. I don't know. I'd have to go back and ask either Callis or Alan Simpson, how did you figure out 30? But you know what, when you put together a top 30, yeah, there are times where it's oh, I'm leaving guys off who I still like, but usually you get to 30 and it's yeah, this is probably the right spot to cut it off. Some organizations it's 20 and you're we're really stretching in the back of this this system here. But whoever whether it's Alan Simpson or Callis who came up with it back in the day, it does still feel like the right number.
Yeah, it's a natural cutoff point. I love it. Well, make sure you follow Ben on Twitter, Ben Badler, baseballamerica.com. Lots of good stuff everywhere. Benjamin Chase, Robbie Baseball 1, Big Gentle Ben on Twitter. I'm at MJ Govier, Palazzo Podcast, 2 L's.
Utah.
2
Give me 2.
Thanks for everybody in the live chat. You contributed. We had a very consistent and healthy audience today who participated. Love the questions. For Ben, Benjamin, and Robbie, I'm Michael Govier. And don't forget, if you're watching now, come back tonight at 7 o'clock. Eric Birdland from the Baltimore Orioles will be here live. Ben, Mike Virginia, and Eric. Nobody knows more about the Orioles than Eric Birdland does. He's on the ground there every year, all the time. Don't miss that one tonight, live at 7 p.m. on this very YouTube channel and all the other destinations. Thank you.